Many years ago, I read a story. It's a few years back. And tells a story about how a psychologist was teaching on stress management to her audience. She lifted a glass and she held it before the people in the room. And of course, their minds immediately went, oh, half empty, half full. That's what she's going to say. And she looked at them and she said, how heavy is the glass I'm holding? Some of the people, they shouted out, oh, 8 ounces, 8 ounces. Others said, 20 ounces. She replied, the absolute weight doesn't matter. It depends on how long I hold it. If I hold it for a minute, it's not a problem. If I hold it for an hour, I'll have an ache in my arm. But if I hold it for a day, my arm will feel numb and paralyzed. In each case, the weight of the glass doesn't change, but the longer I hold it, the heavier it becomes. Interesting? In each case, the weight of the glass doesn't change, but the longer I hold it, the heavier it comes. She continued. She says, the stresses and worries in life are like that glass of water. Think about them for a while, nothing happens. Think about them for a bit longer, and they begin to hurt. And if you think about them all day long, you feel paralyzed and incapable of doing anything. And she went on to say, remember, this is a secular teaching. She went on to say, remember to let go of your stresses. As early as you can, put the glass down. Don't carry them around to the next day. Remember to put the glass down. In each case, the weight of the glass doesn't change, but the longer I hold it, the heavier it becomes. This morning, I would like us just to consider that. We're going to look at a couple of verses in Matthew chapter 11. I'm going to read from Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 to 30. Everyone will know these couple of verses. Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come to me. When we think about this morning, we think about Jesus. He's inviting the people to come to him. This wasn't something new to the people who listened. And maybe this morning you're here today and you've heard this message before. You've sat in many a service and you've heard someone say, come to Jesus. God said it to the people in Jeremiah. He said to them, if you come to me, you will find rest for your souls. Of course, the people of Israel chose not to listen. And as a result, they were carried off by the armies from the north. And then we come into the New Testament and we see how Jesus, he comes to the people and he says, come to me. He called the disciples to follow him. But we also know that in this passage that Jesus was speaking, he was speaking the Pharisees of the law, they were listening. And we're all aware about how they put stresses and burdens on people. They had all these prohibitions and commandments for the people to follow in order to come to God. And then we move on in Scripture, in the New Testament, and we see after Jesus' death and resurrection and ascension back to the Father, did it change? Did it change for the people? We see in Acts 15 how the council at Jerusalem have this big discussion about how people must be circumcised in order to be saved. And of course, Peter, he stands up and he addresses them. And he says, that's not how it is. What about you and I today? Do we accept Jesus' invitation to come to him just as we are? Or do we set ourselves up with lots of rules and regulations and think we sit here this morning or stand here this morning and think, gosh, I failed him so much this week. How can I come to him? I have a testimony. I won't share it this morning, all of it, but I have a testimony. My life is one of someone who really drove themselves into the ground trying to be a follower of Jesus. I got caught up in so many things that I was doing, spinning so many plates, that I burned out as a result of that. I lost that rest in my soul because I was doing so much for the Lord. And I'm not saying, hear me this morning, I'm not saying that we sit around and we aren't active for Jesus, but at the same time, there is a place in the middle. So let's just think about a few things this morning in this passage. Jesus says, come to me. Come to me. It's as simple as that. Come to me. He talks here about the people that he's speaking to. They're weary and burdened. They're exhausted from trying to come to God. They're burdened down. The crowds that Jesus, and earlier in Matthew, he talks about them being like sheep without a shepherd. And we all know the story of Mary and Martha. Mary spends time at Jesus' feet. Martha, she's busy doing all of the things. But as simple as that, come to me. It's a simple promise, come to me. And of course, when Jesus said that, we know that he is eternal. He is the one. He's our Savior and he's our King this morning. So maybe today, God's speaking to you. Maybe today he's prompting you. Maybe, as I say, you've sat in many a service before and you've heard someone speak and you've never responded. But maybe today he's saying to you, come to me. It could be a first time or it could be a fresh coming to him this morning. A Christian author and speaker was leading a seminar for a group of pastors and leaders. The topic of the seminar was staying spiritually fresh. Good topic, staying spiritually fresh. There were about 30 people gathered in the room. And the author and the speaker who was going to be taking the seminar, she soon noticed a female pastor in the room. Took her eye. This was before the seminar began. And she noticed that this pastor was on her phone quite a lot. She wasn't interacting with the people, the other leaders in the room. She was animated. She was on the phone. She was oblivious to who was there. But remember, the seminar that she's attending is going to start staying spiritually fresh. The speaker noticed, came to time to start. She looked over at the female pastor, and as soon as the seminar began, her head dropped to the table and she fell asleep. Staying spiritually fresh. At the end of the session, the speaker thought, I'll get to her, because she was quite concerned for this pastor. But the pastor made a beeline for the door with her phone at her ear. Had she come to Jesus? Where was she? What glasses was she holding in her hand that day? If you think about it, staying spiritually fresh, and whenever the speaker starts, her head hits the table because she falls asleep. And I think this morning God is calling me, but he's calling you also to come, to reset. What glasses are you holding today? What glasses are you carrying around? Remember, it's not the weight of the glass, is how long we hold it. That's whenever it becomes a problem. Jesus says, come to me. Then he says, take my yoke. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Of course, Jesus here was using a metaphor that his listeners would have really known about. They knew that in the Old Testament, a yoke was used as a metaphor whenever the people were under foreign oppression. It says in the Egyptian captivity, whenever God was taking the people out, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, so that you no longer be slaves to Egyptians. I broke the bars of your yoke. But here Jesus is using this as a metaphor to the people, which is something I believe to say to us today. So the yoke, we can all picture it. I'm sure we've all seen the picture of the two oxen, the two animals, and they're yoked equally together. And it says that this was designed, it's for two, and the instrument was used to bring strength to the two animals as they pulled together. There are many theologians in the room this morning. Ask them afterwards. They'll give you greater detail than I can. But I believe this morning that Jesus is calling you and I, as followers of him, to just look at how we're walking with him. If we think about the Pharisees and the leaders, they put so much strain on people in their followership of Jesus, a followership of God. They didn't say come to God, they said do. But what about you and I today as followers of Jesus? I believe that religion is always going to be something that you and I chase, and we never meet the mark. But relationship is getting into the yoke with Jesus, and we allow him to take the lead. Come to me, he says. Take my yoke. The two animals were placed together, but there's a leadership in that whenever we come to Jesus and we follow him. I read this story this week as I was preparing. This man, a Christian author, and he wrote about it. He was out in a car with this other guy, and they noticed as they were driving past a field, there was a farmer, and he was out ploughing with a team of oxen. But this author, he writes, he thought it's a bit unfair as he looked at the team that were pulling, because one of the oxen was really huge, and the other was a very small bullock. The bigger one, he towered over the smaller one. And he thought, the author, he writes, he says, I was so amazed and perplexed to see a farmer trying to plough with two such unequal animals in the yoke. So he said he commented to the man that he was traveling with. But the man who was traveling with, he stopped the car and he says, I want you to notice something. See the way the traces are hooked to the yoke. You will observe that the large ox is pulling all the weight. The little bullock is being broken into the yoke, but it's not actually pulling the weight. Wonderful picture about you and I as we walk with Jesus. If we think about a normal yoking, there's a weight distribution, two animals the same size. But if we think, Jesus says, come to me, he says, take my yoke. We're with him. He bears the load this morning, and we are yoked to him. And you know the amazing thing? We get to share in the joy of following him, walking with him, seeing fruit in our ministry and in every day in our lives. But he carries the burden. He bears the load this morning. So come to me. In a few minutes, we're going to take communion together. And that's an opportunity where we can come, maybe for the first time, to Jesus. Or maybe God's calling you this morning to reset. Again, he talks about take my yoke. What about you this morning? Are you allowing him to take the lead? Are you trying to do all the directing? That's what led to my burnout, in 2013 when I burned out. I was in that yoke with Jesus, but I was trying to be the stronger one. I was walking with him. My prayer time, Bible readings, everything, nothing slipped. But that one thing had. I was trying to take the lead. I was trying to be the stronger one in the relationship instead of letting him take the lead. What about you this morning? Do you feel in your walk with the Lord that maybe it's a bit ill-fitting? It's not fitting quite right this morning. Maybe you feel weighed down by prayer or prayer needs or something in your life today. Maybe he's saying to you this morning, let me take the lead. Stay close to me and let me take the lead today. So Jesus' invitation to you and I this morning, come to me. Take my yoke. And then he goes on to say, learn from me. Learn from me. If we think about the two animals that are yoked together, they're working together, they're pulling together. Remember, the more experienced animal, he's taken the lead, he's taken the burden. But Jesus, I believe, he offers us this partnership and a relationship with him. And we can learn as we walk with him. It says in the Message version of this, keep company with me, says Jesus. And by doing so, you will find rest for your soul. And Christianity, I grew up in Northern Ireland, as you guess by my accent. But Christianity, or in Northern Ireland, there's so much religion. So much religion. People trying to get to know God by how they're doing. But it's as simple as come to me. Learn from me. And what is God prompting you to learn in the weeks ahead? What goals are you setting yourself as you walk with Jesus? Have you become mediocre in your walk with the Lord? Are you setting yourself some goals? This week I started an online course in the evenings, how to hear God. Because I want to tune my ear and my heart, how to hear God. I've still got a big L, a big learner sign on me. What about you today? What's God saying to you? What goals are you going to set today? Learn from me. Learn from me. So a couple of things just as I finish. What glass are you holding? And you're holding it too long. And God is asking you to set it down. There's a few things I've written down. It could be the glass that you're holding. It could be in relation to your walk with God. You always feel you don't quite meet the mark. You get to that place where prayer is a burden. You hear someone at the front and they talk about prayer and you think, oh no, not again. Or you hear someone at the front say, they get up, or you're talking to someone, it doesn't have to be at the front after the service, and they say, oh, I set my alarm for 5 o'clock every morning, and I get up and I read 10 chapters of the Bible and I pray for 1 hour. Remember, come to me is about relationship. It's not about rules. The glass you could be holding this morning could be loss or grief. Remember, it's not how heavy the glass is, it's how long we hold it. It becomes a problem. In each case, the weight of the glass doesn't change, but the longer I hold it, the heavier it becomes. And maybe today, God's asking you to set it down. So as we respond to Jesus' invitation, come to me. That would mean something different for each one of us today. Could be for the first time. Could be a reset. A recharge this morning in our walk with the Lord. Take my yoke. Keep company with Jesus today. Take my yoke. Remember, he's the one. He's the stronger oxen in the picture, the image I shared. Learn from me. Consider what might help you develop in your relationship with him this morning.